The infected blood scandal, a shadow over the NHS. The long-awaited final report from the public inquiry into the infected blood scandal is set to unleash a torrent of revelations, including recommendations for prosecution against those responsible, The Guardian has learned. This pivotal moment for victims and bereaved families will culminate in the presentation of the inquiry's findings on Monday, exposing the depths of what has been described as the most catastrophic treatment disaster in the history of the National Health Service, NHS. A legacy of tragedy and cover-up. The inquiry, chaired by former Judge Sir Brian Langstaff, has meticulously examined the events that led to the infection of over 30,000 patients with hepatitis C and HIV from the 1970s to the early 1990s. The tragedy stemmed from the use of contaminated blood products imported from the United States. As a result of this negligence, an estimated 3,000 individuals have succumbed to the effects of these infections. Compensation and accountability. In the wake of the report's release, the Treasury will unveil a substantial compensation package totaling approximately £10 billion. This financial aid will be funded through borrowing, recognizing the moral obligation to provide solace to the victims and their families. Although the inquiry lacks the authority to determine civil or criminal liability, its report is widely anticipated to recommend prosecutions, potentially implicating current or former NHS officials. The gravity of the scandal, with its trail of death and suffering, demands accountability and justice. The road to justice, legal complexities and historical barriers. The possibility of prosecutions, however, is a complex matter. Corporate manslaughter, in particular, is an intricate offense to prove. Since its introduction in 2008, there have been only a handful of successful prosecutions involving the NHS. Des Collins, a senior partner at Collins Solicitors, representing numerous victims and their families, believes that recommendations for prosecution are highly probable. However, he acknowledges that the path to justice may be arduous. "That wouldn't surprise me at all," he said. The interim report criticized the entire system, individual, collective, and systemic. That level of culpability can only point to corporate manslaughter or criminal negligence. Precedents in other countries, such as France, where former prime ministers and ministers faced charges of manslaughter in a similar blood scandal, raise questions about the likelihood of similar outcomes in the UK. Collins, while hopeful, remains cautious. "Whether it will end up as in France with people in jail and very serious prosecutions, I suspect not, but I'm happy to be proved wrong," he said. A call for justice, political and legal consensus. The inquiry has gathered compelling evidence suggesting that civil servants, government officials, and senior doctors were aware of the impending disaster long before any meaningful action was taken. The inquiry's report is expected to lay bare the systemic failures that allowed this avoidable tragedy to unfold. Andy Burnham, a former health secretary and mayor of Greater Manchester, has been a vocal advocate for corporate manslaughter charges in this case. In 2022, he wrote to Conservative leadership candidates, urging them to consider such charges against the Department of Health and its related bodies. Ben Harrison, head of public law at Milners, a firm representing core participants in the inquiry, acknowledges the challenges of pursuing corporate manslaughter charges due to the time frame of the offenses. However, he highlights that the continued loss of life since 2007 could potentially open the door to such charges. Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has strongly condemned the lack of compensation for victims until this point. "We must seize this moment to finally deliver justice. No more warm words, no more false dawns, the time has come for justice," he wrote in the Sunday Times. A day of reckoning and a promise of reparation. The publication of the final report on Monday will be a pivotal moment for victims, their families, and the nation as a whole. It will expose the depths of the tragedy and the failures that led to it. While the road to justice may be long and complex, the government's commitment to compensation and the possibility of prosecution signal a long overdue step towards accountability and closure. The inquiry's findings will cast a harsh light on the past, but they also hold the promise of a better future. By learning from the mistakes of the infected blood scandal, the NHS and the government can work together to ensure that such a tragedy never happens again.